drink, but I think it's from there last night.
Yesterday.
It's from this morning.
No, yesterday.
So I'm the Shaila. If it would be in a metal cup, it would be a problem. But if it's in glass, it's not a problem. But it's my magula, water that's exposed. But the halacha is, if you live in a place where there's no scorpions and snakes, you can drink water. It would be metal, you'd have to spill it out.
Oh.
Yeah, water says overnight in a kettle cup, you have to spill it. But this is not metal, it's glass.
But hot water earns over Shabbos.
It's a problem.
Really?
Yeah, and it says Shem Psaim Hashem. It specifically says it's a question. It's a question, there's an answer, and there are people who get glass Chineks for this reason. They're really really religious for it. If you go into a house and there's a glass Chinek, that's the reason.
What about like ceramic?
Sorry.
Like ceramic?
Those are some glass, metal. Mayim and clean mattress, you have to spill up. But again, there's a justification that says
We don't
God
limit.
protects the fools. Shem Psaim Hashem. Put your head in the shulchan aruch. It's an exemption. Shem Psaim Hashem. No, it's not. It's the one I gave you before. If you don't have it, I'll give it.
Please.
I gotta sit down and get myself together. Yeah. Did you know I did a, what do they call it? For Chabad.org, an interview.
Oh yeah, Mrs. Cohen sent that.
So, one of the comments was so special, made me feel so good. I'm going to read it to you. Just to blow my own horn, just to show how humble I am. I love this. It's so special. Don't be misled. Of all the rabbis I have heard and listened from, Rabbi Paltiel is the best at transmitting the feeling of every aspect of which he teaches. Psychology rabbis reveal much about the human Hashem interaction. However, Rabbi Paltiel has a superior ability to transmit the emotion of Torah. His words hit you squarely between the eyes, and the learner gets both the logic and the emunah. That's what I like. That's how I feel. That's my job. The logic and the emunah of what is taught. Rabbi Paltiel adds to our own emunah more than any other lecturer or teacher that I've seen. The power and force of his own emotional emunah is great and valuable. If anyone in his orbit wrongly believes that he should function like an empathetic, kindly teacher, they have definitely missed the extreme value of his teaching. I could have written that. Actually, I couldn't. But you can't give me a bigger compliment than that. And I'm very touched. Israel's complaining how come Machon Chana hasn't started yet, okay?
That's what, there's a girl
It's
downstairs.
Wednesday, that's Machon Day. I also know that's 2 year, wondering if maybe there's a special program, and so what time? Huh?
That's what we're saying.
Yeah, what did you just say? I didn't hear you.
Said there's someone downstairs who went, what are the people in Israel doing now? Like, they're waiting for you, you know?
Someone actually said that?
Yeah, someone was like, the people in Israel are waiting.
That's hysterical. I'm sorry I'm late, but like I said, if I need excuses, I got one.
Sicha's fault.
The Rebbe used to ask people if they didn't do something, why they didn't do it. But the people who work with the Rebbe knew that when the Rebbe asks why, don't answer him. Because he doesn't want an answer. It's a protest. Why didn't you do it? Doesn't mean tell me why you didn't do it. Why did you do it means next time do it. He didn't want excuses. He didn't want to hear them. So why did he ask? It was his way of saying next time do it, you know? So when Rabbi Paltiel comes a half an hour late, why did he come a half an hour late? I didn't do Rabbi Natami, I didn't finish davening. But the Sicha is so hard to get into. I prepared it before Pesach, I taught it before Pesach, I know how to sort of revisit it. I got up this morning at 6, I worked on the Sicha this morning.
So I grew up in a
It's not extra, it's had your name on it. Do you need one? Moira, yeah. Do you need one?
Oh, can I have one, please, Nadia?
Okay, I just want you to know that the backs of the sheets are another Sicha. Don't get misled. You don't need them. She did that. I didn't tell her to make only one side. Yet.
This is mine?
I don't know. So one of yours is here. You put your name on it if you want. Does everybody have one, or we can make more copies of it?
Yes.
Okay, so now we know whose name is everybody. No, we didn't. You're in half. I is a Sikh. I is a Sikh.
I'm on the last page, but 21.
No, page 114. Page one, the Sicha starts at page 114.
Oh. Oh, I see, okay.
Do you have it? Is
another
this all?
one. All right.
Do you have it?
Flip it all the way over.
Oh, yeah.
Books and sin.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay. Okay, so here we go. Ay. Whew. Yeah, Mishpah. I want to meet someone in Israel protesting having the class as of that, yes. Okay. Do this. It's Friday. The 5th day of the month of Sivan. It's the last day before the Jewish people are going to get the Torah. And in getting the Torah, they're going to enter into a covenant with God, which is going to bind us to Him, and maybe more profoundly, Him to us for posterity.
Is this a new Sicha?
No,
Okay.
there is so much going on that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't even find the time to go up to the mountain and have another conversation with God. He's busy in the camp. He's preparing the Jews. Now, part of the reason he's so busy is because of his taking the side of the Jewish people on the question of whether they would all become prophets or only Moshe would be a prophet. We talked about that story so many times, I'm not going to repeat that now. But he's very busy. He's busy helping the Jewish people achieve Pishus. 48 hours to become a prophet, something which the greatest and the holiest of people need a lifetime for. Jews had 48 hours, and we all know how that ended. We talked about it, and we will talk about it in Mitzvah Hashem.
Yes.
But he's busy with other things also. Besides, for this whole preparation business, there's also the conversion. Moshe's Jewish people are going through Gatos. The Jewish people are being converted. The Jewish people are being converted to be Jews, gated. Now, I don't want to delve into this because I'm not sure about it, but being a Jew starts in Avraham Avinu on the neshama side. Being a Jew starts at Matan Torah on the guf side, that the idea that the body is Jewish, not just the soul, or to say it in mystical words, your essence is Jewish, not just your function. This begins at Har Sinai. And the day before the Torah was given, Moshe Rabbeinu converts the Jewish people en masse, collective. Now, there have been a number of sichas that have touched on this conversion. One of them told us that the conversion was not complete because you can't convert to a religion which you don't even have in its entirety. So though they made the conversion on Friday, the conversion was not satisfied until they got the satisfied. They missed the 10 Commandments, which include the whole Torah. Another sikha that we learned talked about the key event was building a mizbeach and bringing a carbon. Moshe Rabbeinu brought a carbon on the mizbeach, and they never discussed what that carbon means in preparing the Jewish people to receive the Torah. And it also explains by the fact that a Gid, a righteous convert, doesn't bring a carbon until Mashiach comes. His Gedus is not incomplete because there's two kinds of Jewishnesses. There's Jewishness with the carbon, which means it's complete, healthy, whole, perfect, and balanced. And there's Jewishness without a carbon, which is what Golos is for all of us, whether we're converts or not. We do a few of the mitzvahs many times, and much of the mitzvahs we can't do at all. So it's a different model. One of the many ideas that became important in the course of this series of sichos and series of classes, which is going on for a long time. It's taken us, we spent a lot of time on Friday. Friday, the 5th of Sivan, has taken us probably half the school year. We've been sitting here a long time. There's the word bris. There's a covenant. There's a binding code and a kind of a jury. One of the aspects, or the significant aspects of the bris is called nafsa v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. The Rebbe goes as far as saying that there were a series of rituals, there were a series of mitzvahs Jewish people did. They did a bris milah, they did a circumcision, they went to the mikvah, they went to carbon, they had the blood of the carbon sprinkled upon themselves. Those events are not the bris, they're the supporting cast of the bris, they're the context of the bris, they're the frame of the bris. The bris itself is the nafsa v'nishma. The statement that we're going to accept mitzvahs, that's the most important. Then we got to this Sicha. This Sicha has the first half and the second half. The first half we learned before Pesach, and the second half, with Hashem's help, we're going to learn today. I would love to finish it today. If I'd come on time, I probably could have. I don't know at this point if I can. I'm not going to spend 20 classes on this. We learned the Sichas relatively speaking rapidly. When the Rebbe gets into Rashi's head in a very, very special way, because Rashi speaks different than the Gemara about every part of the story. Now, the Rebbe doesn't go into why Rashi argues with the Gemara, at least not completely, but he does flush out what the Rashi is thinking. And what he flushes out is really, it's very, very subtle. It's very beautiful. Really, it's very, very sublime. It's very, very, very subtle. And the essence of it is that Moshe Rabbeinu brings korbanos. Half the blood goes on the mizbeach, half the blood is sprinkled on the people. And by doing this, by dividing the blood in half and giving half to the mizbeach and half to the people, the Jewish people are going through this event of covenants. They're being brought into the covenant. They're being converted. They're brought into the covenant. So the Rebbe brought from the Mefarshim, from commentaries, who explained this emphasis. That Moshe divided the blood in half. Half the blood he put on the mizbeach, and half the blood he sprinkled on the people. That it's similar to the event of the Bris Bein Absalom. It's similar to the event of the covenant between the parties. This morning at 6:35, I was sitting on my computer watching me talk to you a month and a half ago. I watched a lot of the class. I started 2 weeks ago, whatever, the last time we learned class with the whole question of being cruel to animals, if you could remember that, cutting animals in half. I watched that old shtickle. Abraham was told by Hashem to take a series of animals, slice them in two, and walk between the parts. And then a fire went between those two parts. It's a symbolic act, right? What is about? An animal is one thing. Now, when you divide an animal in half, you kill the animal. Animal's dead. But an animal has life. And life doesn't die. Life is forever. When you physically cut an animal in half, when that animal's body is going to be eaten up, or that animal's body is going to decompose until it can go away, the life of that animal, those are going to flutter away. But if that animal's body is intact, which is what happens as soon as the animal dies, the body is split in half, so the animal is dead. The life of that animal is present in that division, and the life is still living. So philosophically, mystically, spiritually, you walk between the parts. What you're doing is you're walking into a single living thing. It's biologically not living, it's spiritually alive. And by dividing it in half, you're literally entering into a living body. The idea of a covenant is two separate entities become one by joining in one living form. That's the concept, that's the idea. So the animal's been sliced in half, it's dead. But the life of that animal is still present, and that life is still living, that life is still one. When you walk through the space, which is between the two parts of the animal, the life is present there because the life is connected to the body. And you and the other entity entering in a covenant find themselves bound together by one single living thing. And in the case of Abraham Avinu, he made the covenant with Hashem, with Almighty Himself, and the Eibishter entering into the covenant represented by a fire, some kind of a manifest of physical fire. What the Rishonim were not tablets but told Eish Nivra, a fire which is representative, it's a gestalt. that represents the Shekhinah, although it's a creation, it's not godly. And that fire followed Abraham Avinu through between the parts, and that's how he and Abraham entered into the covenant. So the Rebbe says, when the Jewish people are being converted the day before the Thanksgiving on Friday, the 5th of Sivan, by bringing karbanos, where half the blood is put on the mizbeach and half the blood is sprinkled on the people, the most important component of that covenant is not the sprinkling of the blood, it's dividing it in half. Just like dividing the animal into two halves is a precursor to walking through between the halves on the part of Abraham Avinu, who's a human being, and Chayach Olah, the Shekhinah, the presence of Hashem, as represented by this fire, which was, we could see it physically, but it was representative of a course, of whatever, however you would explain it in mysticism, in philosophy, however you explain it in mysticism, they join together by dividing the blood in half. That division, that separation between half and half creates a space where the Yidden and the Eibishter can pass through the center of it and be brought together. In other words, the blood of the animal represents the life of the animal. Dividing the blood of the animal in half means one living seed is divided into two physical spaces. And again, the animal is no longer alive, but the life, the soul of that animal is still present because the physical blood is still present. When you divide it in half and you enter between the parts, however this was done in this particular case, it brings a binding with the giving and connection. Okay? This idea that the most important aspect of the covenant between Yidden and Hashem is dividing the blood in half, which, like I said before, that's not the Rebbe's original idea. You have that from earlier study. In footnote 31, you bring the Chizkuni and others, that by dividing the blood in half, it's reminiscent of dividing this Ben Absalom in half. Has two halves. The Sicha is divided into two parts, the first half and the second half. The Sicha is very scholarly, I have to say. The Sicha is very scholarly, very involved. Because there's different opinions, there's different versions in Rashi. And the Rebbe develops a different theory to how to understand the Rashi based on the various versions of the Rashi text. The Rashi text, not a Chazal Rashi. But the basic difference between the first half of the Sicha, which we already learned, and the second half of the Sicha, which we're about to learn, is which division represents the covenant. In the first half of the Sicha, you're listening?
Mhm.
The division that represents the covenant means that half the blood went on the Mizbeach and half the blood was given on the Jews. Half of the Mizbeach, half of the Yidden, the blood is divided in half. Half is here, so the Jews and our Hashem are in that empty space and they're brought together in the covenant. That doesn't change his mind now. And he's going to argue that the two halves of the blood representative of the covenant are not the half that went on the Mizbeach and the half that sprinkled on the Jews, but the two halves of blood that were both sprinkled on the Jews. The half that's called the Shlomim and the half that's called the Noel. He's going to change his mind. And he's going to add a greater depth to the covenant, and then he's going to conclude the Sicha by explaining mystically the superiority of this covenant over the covenant of Abraham and the parts. If we get to later in the Sicha. I'm going to repeat myself a second time. Then we're going to learn, okay? And at some point, we're going to honor a needy request and we'll break, and we'll get down here or somewhere. I would love to finish the Sicha today, but I doubt I will. Okay? In the Sicha, the key component of the episode that talks about the creating of the covenant is splitting the blood, not sprinkling it. Splitting it. But which splitting? In the first half, it's splitting the blood. Half goes to God and half goes to him. And in the second half, which we have yet to learn, we're going to learn today, it's both halves that were sprinkled on the Yidden. The half that goes to God's not the picture. The blood which is sprinkled on the Yidden itself has two halves, and those two halves are representative of the covenant. As you will see, the Rebbe flush out. Of course, what the Rebbe does in the Sicha is he proves it from the language of Rashi. The Rebbe is very technical. The Rebbe is a scholar. He studies Rashi and he shows you in Rashi's words these various different arguments. I'm not that interested in showing it to you in Rashi's words. I'm interested in you coming away with the philosophy, with ideas. The covenant with the Yidden and Hashem is created by dividing something in half, as it was by Abraham Avinu. the novelty of the second half of the Sicha. The first half of the Sicha is it's not that it happens for Hashem and happens for us, but that both halves are for us. In the wording of the Rebbe, who appreciates by Lakam, as we'll find out momentarily. I am speaking 14 minutes and 3 seconds. That was a pretty efficient introduction.
Yeah.
Questions or comments? No questions? No comments. Your name is still living. Got it. Okay, so go to the first page, 115, please, first page. The first page of the Sicha, which of course we learned today. You see numbers 1 and 2, first paragraph, second paragraph, you have 1 on your margin, 2 on your margin. The 1 and 2 on the first page of the Sicha are going to become the first half of the Sicha and the second half of the Sicha. So 1 we completed, 1 we learned. I want to reread 1 and remind you how we learned it already, and then read 2 as a segue into what we're going to be learning in the Sicha, okay? The Sicha begins with a biblical quote from the Apostle. It's not even the so Moshe Rabbeinu sent the young lads of Israel, which means the firstborn, the Bechorim, who were at that time the high priests. Until the story with the golden calf, the firstborn were priests. That's how it was in Egypt. That's how it was in many civilizations. But Yalu Oilos Goyim Mizrachim Shlomim Lasham. They built Oilos, that means sacrifice, which is completely eaten by the Mizbeach. And Zvachim, other sacrifice, which is called peace offering. So what's a peace offering? God gets a piece, the Kohen gets a piece, and the host, the one who brings the covenant. And then it says, Moshe took half of the blood. He put into basin or bowls to sprinkle the Jewish people later. The other half of the blood, which he had in other kinds of basins and bowls, which although it doesn't say it in the text of the Bible, they would be called mizrakois. Mizrak means a basin that's used to spray on the Mizbeach. So the blood that was taken for the Jewish people is called agonis. The blood which was put in the basin of the Mizbeach is called mizrakois. Right, Isarak al-Bech is sprinkled on the Mizbeach. He took the book of the covenant, which we discussed at great length before, what the book of the covenant was, and then I said that before Matan Torah there was a separation. Remember? 2 parts of Judaism, the mitzvahs and the theology, and once the Torah is given, they become a singularity. Yes, you said yes, even if you didn't say yes, and even if you didn't remember, we all confirmed that we learned this already. Vayikra, right? And he called the Jewish people. Vayikach Meishach Adam, he took the blood, Vayizik al-Ha'am, he sprinkled it on the people. Vayarim, and he declared, Here they behold the blood of the covenant, Ashakar of the Shamim Macham, the game that the Almighty has created them to. This paragraph, when flushed out by the Sicha that we learned before Yom Tov, is saying that where was the covenant? The covenant was in the fact that half the blood went on the Mizbeach and half the blood was sprinkled on the Jewish people. So there's a division in half, and they go in 2 different physical spaces, and between those 2 physical spaces is given a covenant when it creates a covenant. But the Rebbe shows how this explanation is not adequate, it's not enough, and the Rebbe digs deeper by bringing us the second paragraph, okay? On this one word ba'agonis, which means the bowl, the basins, the receptacles that held the half of the blood of both the oila and the shlomim, which is meant to be sprinkled on the Jewish people, it says shtei agonis. There were 2 of these bowls. Echad b'chatzi dam oila, 1 for half the blood of the sacrifice, which is completely eaten by the Mizbeach. The etz echad b'chatzi dam shlomo, the other is the basin which holds the blood, which is brought for the peace offering, which will also be sprinkled on the Mizbeach. Lahazois oisam al-am, to sprinkle both halves of the blood on the people, and then it actually uses the word which the Rebbe makes a big deal out of in the Sicha that we learned, that we're going to learn. Umikan, from here. From here doesn't mean for bringing the karbanos. From here, from the dividing the blood in half, we learn. Lamdu Rabbi Seinu, our rabbis taught. Our ancestors went into the covenant, the meal with the circumcision, with the meal and going to the mikvah, and sprinkling blood on themselves, or there's another girsan actually which the Gemara brings which means making the blood willful by putting it on the mizbeach, as the Chazal say, you never sprinkle blood on a person if you didn't go to the mikvah first. So the Yidden brought a carbon, they went to the mikveh, they brought a bismillah, they went to the mikveh, they brought a carbon, they brought a bismillah, they went to the mikveh, the blood was sprinkled on. What is the difference between the first paragraph and the second paragraph? The difference is the division. In the first paragraph, the division is into two. And in the second paragraph, the division is emphasized to be into four. Why? You have two karbanos. A karban oil and a karban shlomim. An offering which is completely consumed by the mizbeach, and a peace offering which is divided equally between the Almighty and the Kayanim, who are the Bechayim, and the Jewish people. Although equally is the right word, but divided. The first half of the Sicha suffices it to say, half the blood to God, half the blood to man, you got to cover it. The second half says no. It's not the half that went to God and went to man, it's both half that went to man. But half is an oil and half is the shlomim, that's the God. So we need to pause. Somebody in Sas said, come in with us. The halacha is you cannot be yoitza mitzvah with an electronic voice. You can't listen to the Megillah over the radio. Because it's not human voice, it's an electric voice. The machine takes your voice apart and it puts it back together in an electric voice. But if you know someone made a bracha, however you find out, someone shakes a handkerchief, like the Gemara speaks about them, the shul in Alexandria. The shul of Egypt was so large that the people in the back couldn't hear the chaz. They'd wave a flag and they would answer Amen. Because the halacha is, as long as you know the bracha was made, and the bracha was made by a Jew who's not going to be a heretic, you can answer Amen. So we can answer the lady in Sfas, or the ladies in Sfas can answer Amen on this bracha. Even though there wasn't, for them it's not a bracha. They can't be yoytz with that bracha, they can answer Amen. I want to repeat another thing which we talked about a number of times. I talked to you about this when I read the Chumash with you at the very beginning. And this is one of those things that's I'm passionate about, because I'm very passionate about Shalom Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. This is sort of on the cusp of that. According to Jewish law, a non-Jew could bring a sacrifice. When a non-Jew brings a sacrifice to the base, I make the you have to accept it. The problem becomes that they have different concepts of movement than we do. They define a blemish less precisely than we do. So the non-Jew will think like, what it means, they're carbon, because he doesn't consider this blemish a blemish in halacha. It gets very, very tricky in halacha how you deal with it. But a non-Jew can bring a carbon in the house of God. Right? You said it in the morning in davening. I haven't said this in 31 days. But this morning, after not saying it all of Nisan, we read the words, Ki beisi beis tefillah yikare l'chol ha'amen. My home is a home of worship for all peoples. You know what I'm talking about? The small type after the Iyar finishes with those words. My home, the Beis HaMikdash, is a home of prayer for all people, not just the Jewish people. A goy could bring a carbon. Moreover, goyim do not have the restrictions that we have. The Jewish people have restrictions. One, they build the Beis HaMikdash in Moiriya, Europe. Once they build the Mikdash in not Li Moiriya, Har Moiriya. Li means I'm afraid of God. Har means a mountain that's a symbol for fear of God. You cannot bring a covenant in place of. No, look, it's not allowed. Before that, they were allowed. Once the Beis HaMikdash was put up, the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, even the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, you can't really. So as I explained to you so many times, you can help, you can teach a non-Jew to bring a Mizbeach on Eastern Parkway. You have to know halachas, and most people don't know halachas because they're not so practical for us. You can help a non-Jew build a Mizbeach and check the carbon and bring a carbon and sprinkle the blood, and it'll be l'ratzei lifnei Hashem. Hashem is going to accept this carbon. But you can't physically help him, you can just talk to him. If he's allowed to bring a carbon in Eastern Parkway, you're not. So non-Jews can bring karbonis, just like Jews can. And remember, who was the first guy who brought karbonis? Anybody know? All the Marish. Adam brought a carbon. Cain and Abel brought karbonis. Noach brought karbonis. Abraham brought karbonis. And the Rambam says that all they brought in the same place. Adam and Isha's carbon was brought to the place where we now have the base of it. Adam in Makom Kappa say Nilu. Adam wasn't Jewish. They brought Kabbalah. Of course, you know that the Ramban uses Adam as a proof that the Rambam is wrong. The Rambam says Kabbalahs are connected to Avodah Zarah. And the Ramban says, really, when Adam and Isha was alive, there was no Avodah Zarah. He was the only guy around. So why did he bring a carbon? He argues with him. It's a whole long story. I have classes on my site where I try to answer the Rambam's approach, which is not for this moment. But there's a fascinating thing. And it's really, really very profound. A non-Jew can only bring one kind of carbon. A carbon that's called, as the word carbon denotes, sacrifice. You give it away. You kill it, shecht it. You do whatever you have to do. You sprinkle the blood, you separate the skin, whatever the details are, you put it there, and you're able to eat it all. You bring it up. It's a sacrifice. When you make a sacrifice, what do you have? Nothing. I want you to make a sacrifice. What's the sacrifice? Be nice to this girl, even though she's rotten miserable to you. That's a sacrifice. What do you get in return? Nothing. It's a sacrifice. That's the meaning of the words. If you're not sacrificing, it ain't no sacrifice. A non-Jew can bring a carbon so long as it's a sacrifice. Sacrifice means you get nothing back. And you have to assume, and it's hard to know with certitude, that the tzaddikim before Matan Torah, like Adam and Ish, like Cain and Abel, like Noach, like Shem and Abel, like Avraham and Yaakov, they were bound by this criteria. When they brought a carbon, the carbon was a sacrifice. They gave it away to Hashem, and they got nothing in return. That was the act, was a sacrifice. When the Jewish nation is born, a new concept of carbon. That's the concept of a peace offering. And the concept of a peace offering is, again, I'm going to say it in very, very unrefined words, but this way you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Right? Who knows what that pasuk is? Me and you and the son of Yishai will wander around Gan Eden. God Almighty came to Yerovam and Avat, Jeroboam, who at one point was a very, very big tzaddik, and then later became one of the greatest Yeshayim, like it says in Pirkei Avos. And he said to Yerovam, if you are a tzaddik, me and you and David will wander together around the David stuff. Me and you and David. You know what David did? Chutzpah said this. Who's going to go first? Me or David? And David said, David, you know what? I'll go become a what an ego. The Abish never came to me with any offers. You understand? He doesn't talk to me much. Why? Because I don't know how to listen. Maybe talk to all of us. We just don't hear. But you never heard. When a Yid brings a peace offering, he sits at the table together with the Abish and he enjoys the meal with them. The fascinating thing. And this is only the Yid. Only Yid have Shalom. It doesn't make us better than Goyim. It makes the Abish decide our relation. We're not better than Goyim. We're luckier than Goyim. And we pay for our luck, let me tell you. We pay for our luck with Holocausts and pogroms and blood libels and crusades. But we're still here. The Jewish people are the chosen. You didn't choose us because of us, you chose us because of our grandparents who were nice Jews, yeah. But part of what changes, what distinguishes the relation between Yidden and God Almighty, and how the whole world is this idea. When you bring a carbon, you don't only give it away, you enjoy it together with the Abraham. Now, I've talked to you about this. And it's actually in Pashas Mishpatim. If I start exploring that, we'll never finish this Friday. Maybe I'll take a do it. You know what it must be like to sit at the same table with God and eat a meal? I mean, how big is his chair? Yeah. How does he hold his fork and his knife? Does he chew it in small bites? Does he eat it in one big gulp? Of course, these are ideas. These are metaphysical ideas. They're not physical, manifest ideas in the literal sense of the word. But it says in the Chumash, they saw God and they ate and they drank, which is explained to mean They got a little too comfortable. On this Friday, the day before Matan Torah, the Jews sat at the same table with the Amish, and they ate food. And they forgot where they were. And later on, they paid with their lives. Later, not right away. When you sit at the same table with the Amish and eat food, don't forget who's sitting opposite you. You're supposed to eat, but you don't laugh and make jokes. And they got carried, they became so comfortable with the presence of the Likud, presence of the Shekhinah, as we call it in Yiddish, that they started to relax. That was a big mistake. But this concept wasn't unique to that day. It's unique to Jewish history. The Mashiach comes, and we can bring abundance, we can bring a peace offering. The ultimate carbon of the peace offering, under the Chazal that says the only carbon that's going to be after Mashiach comes is the carbon Torah. Carbon Torah is a peace offering that's brought with chametz. And the whole chassidus why that is. But part of it is in the days Teiras Zerach Hashlom. Im al Torah Yakirenu. The Torah is a peace offering. What does the peace offering mean? You and the Kohen and the Eibishter sit at the same table and they share the meat. If you get a little too comfortable, it's going to be bad. You have to know who mistake, if I've ever mistake, where you're standing, in front of whom you're standing. But there is this concept of a peace offering. So Moshe Rabbeinu, on that Friday, and I'm going to make a statement which I can in no way confirm, for the first time in history, brought a carbon between the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, brought a sacrifice to the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, were part of that meat the Yidden themselves made. Because this was a precedent for this notion that in the Yidden relationship with Hashem, sacrifice doesn't only mean you give away and you get nothing back, except what you learn, so to speak, but you get to sit at the same table with everything and sharing the meat. That's what the second paragraph is saying, that the blood was divided in half. But each half was in turn two halves. Half was the blood of the oil, the blood that was going to be part of the carbon, which was completely consumed by the there. And half that is representative of the shlavim, the part that you didn't have any. Okay? And that's the covenant. Not the half that goes on the Mizbeach and the half that you didn't get, but the two halves that you didn't get is divided in half. The half that you didn't get that they give away, and the half that you didn't get that they keep. The half that they didn't get that they give away is the oil half. The half that they didn't get that they keep is the shlavim. Questions or comments?
Yes, is the Shlomo the same as the Torah? Yeah, it's a different type of sacrifice.
It's a different kind of shlavim. But shlavim is for 2 days and a night. A Torah is for a day and a night, and it has chametz, has bread, chametz like chametz. But it's considered a shlavim. Yeah, look, it's called the chumash of shlavim.
Yeah, so they gave Olad and Spanim and both of one and half.
Right, half for God and half for them. But the half of the oil was for them is also about sacrifice, and the half of the shlavim, which is for them, is about sitting at the same table with English. This really freaks me out. Just wow. You never think about these things until you learn Chumash. You want to say something?
One thing, but it's when, let's say, when they're going to get to the final, like, slamming, you the slamming when the in town, right? So there is like, it's like chametz and Sicha, like.
You're talking about the Torah part.
Yeah, it seems to be like a special, like, celine and things like that. Everything is being special.
The base on English, everything was based on. Except for this common thread. Yeah. Twice in the base of English.
When I was in my house, so
No, it's always the base of English.
they need to eat it in the room.
They had to eat it in Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
Huh?
I live in Jerusalem, yeah.
So that's in your house, yeah, in Yerushalayim, but not in the base of English. Cut your couch.
Okay. But, okay.
Don't be afraid.
No,
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Okay.
It needs to be like some special carrying, special everything. I can't just make it like with the other stuff, yeah, I mean,
The bread, you mean.
yeah.
The base on English was Pesach day, except for two chametz. The Shtei Alechem, which is the carbon they bring on Shavuos, and this Taita. On Pesach, we do not say Nevel Seder. Are you aware of that? Why not? Because of the comments. Sukkot, you do say Nevel Seder. Shabbos and Yom Tov, you don't say Nevel Seder because you the covenant is not, we always work on the bound. In the week, you say. Chalamai, you say it. Okay, does anybody know how long is 300 seconds?
5 minutes.
We know, yeah.
5 minutes.
We're gonna reconvene in 300 seconds. Let's see if we can keep our word. Okay, I'm gonna go get myself. Stay awake, drink. 5 minutes, people. 17 to 17 to 12.
Oh, right, up to 6 years. I understand now. What is that? Wow. clever. Oh, it's up to 6 years. I was like, so what's a kid's talk? Like if it's teenage talk, then like, you know, if I realize a kid, like the size of 6.
It's so crazy.
Yes, I saw. There you are.
Down to 1995 with an additional 50% off. Was a $10 anthropology cup. And it's nice. Thank you.
Send it to me. By the way, I've been watching you write. I don't know if I was going to tell you or not, but your notes are really good.
Oh, thank you.
The only problem with what's it called, with button down tops in the summer is that like if you move, like you don't want to put something underneath. You know what I'm saying?
And the material will hold sweating. But it's really pretty.
Yes, then
Okay, we have to goes up to here, leave it out straight, and then what you do is you take about half and you tie it, you bunch it up the bottom and you tie it, and you get more bottom.
Bailey, yeah. Okay, I like that.
I know, yes, I said Amen. I figured you're not this my Israeli student.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am.
I was away from the function, I met someone who said he was in the first high school class he ever taught.
What's his name?
Houston?
Yeah, he was in California. I'm in touch with him. He actually told me, he called me on the Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
He was my first high school class. When did you first high school class?
So he said,
What was the first name? What's the first name? What's with me? Ellie this me. God bless him. He's a miracle. He's a miracle. He's mamish a miracle. He's a miracle. I can't tell you why, but in his past, there's something exceedingly dark beyond imagination. He's Baruch Hashem, beautiful guy. Wife, children's grandchildren. Yeah, he actually called me for Pesach. I love my students, you know, even the ones I screamed at. And some of them over time forget that I screamed at them and they love me back.
he spoke very highly of you.
Yeah. I'm telling you, he's a miracle beyond imagination. A mess. What a guy, Baruch Hashem.
You told me to mention to you something about note cards.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, when I started out, I always prepare my classes. But I have hundreds of index cards in boxes. I always came to class with my cards, and what I would do is I would teach the same material every year, so I would use the old cards and I would upgrade them, I update them. My students for the first 10 years defined me by index cards. Then I stopped getting index cards, but I have them, still have them. When I was in college, Rabbi Heller gave a shiur once a week. And he had index cards. So that's where I learned index cards from. Yeah. Hey, I don't know what 300 seconds is, huh? This was 420 seconds. Okay, let's go. Did we read number 2 yet? We did it, yeah,
Yeah.
read it, right? So now everybody go to the second half of the Sicha, which is page 118. After the 2 horizontal lines that are made in the text, this is where the second half of the Sicha begins. What's remaining the same is that the most important part of the covenant is the division. What's being altered is which division. In the first half of the Sicha, the division was the half that God gets and the half that we get. Now the division is going to be in the half that we got for oilah, the half that we got for sacrifice, and the half that we got to sit with the Eibush at the same table and eat and drink. Rashi brings this idea of dividing the blood. Rashi stops on one word. Agonis. Agonis means basins or bowls. But remember, we have 2 different Hebrew words for basins and bowls. The basin and the bowl which held the blood, which is for us, is called agonis. Agad, Lashon Yochid, Aganot, Lashon Rabin, the plural for Agad, right? And the basins which were used to hold the blood, which was sprinkled on the Mizbeach, is all over the Chumash called a mizrach. Mizrach means a beaker, a receptacle that is for the purposes of spraying. Tzrika, to spray. So it actually stops on the word ba'agonis. Moshe took the blood and put them in basins. What do basins mean? The kind of receptacles that are for people. Because if Moshe was speaking about the half of the blood that we kept, and the half of blood that went in his Mizbeach, he would say, you see? The half that we keep and the half that we give to the Mizbeach, but he doesn't do that. It says only ba'agonis. Rashi repeated that. What Rashi is trying to press on, what nerve is Rashi pressing on when he says this, is levad hatam, to explain the reason why there's a need for 2 different bowls to hold the blood, even though the blood in this bowl and the blood in this bowl is both for sprinkling on Yidden. Neither of the halves is for the Mizbeach. The blood that's sprinkled on the Yidden needs to be in 2 separate bowls. Half of one basin was for the half of the blood which was used for the sacrifice that called a sacrifice, you give it away. The echad b'chatzi dam shlomim, and the other basin is for the blood that's going to hold the peace offering that we get to sit with the Eibush at the same table and eat. And the Rebbe explains, page 119, first column, 3rd paragraph. You know how this works, right? If you read only the underline, you'll be perfect. Says the Rebbe, Teichin Inyan Aknisa Lebris. Rashi holds. Now the first half of the Sicha said something different, right? The Rebbe changed his mind. The first half of the Sicha, the Rebbe was relying on other commentaries who provided him the foundation of this notion of dividing things in half. The Rebbe is now pushing the envelope further. The substance, the content of entering into the covenant, by sprinkling blood, it's not the 2 halves of the blood, namely the half that went for us and half that went to the Mizbeach. No, not so. Mistake. Ella, but rather, al yedei, through the fact, hadam, the blood, which is entirely for us. This blood is sprinkled on Yidden, and this blood is sprinkled on Yidden, and nevertheless, shesam Moshe b'shtei agonas. If you're collecting blood to sprinkle on the mizbeach, if you're collecting blood to sprinkle on people, put them in 2 bowls. Moshe put them in 4. And the half that went on the mizbeach is the material. It's the half that's sprinkled on us that we're concerned with, because the covenant happened by dividing the blood in half that's going to be sprinkled on the Jewish people. Echad lechatzi dam oilo, 1 basin held the blood of the sacrifice, which would be sprinkled on the Jewish people. Ve'echad lechatzi dam shlomim, and the other bowl held the blood, which was the sacrifice for the part of the curtain, which is called peace. We get to sit and enjoy it together with the Eibush Tekmayach. Turn the page. Page 120. Okay? And now you're sort of going to read what I already told you. Okay? You want to know how smart I am. I know how to read Hebrew and translate and repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Learn, prepare, teach. Says the Holy Rebbe. You with me? Page 120. The underline. What is the difference between a sacrifice that's called sacrifice and a sacrifice that's called peace? Bepashtus, very simple. Very simple. Who the difference is? The sacrifice, which is called sacrifice, that's burned by the Mizbeach of Levi, Hashem gets it. What do you have from it? Gunish. Gunish means nothing in Yiddish. It's a sacrifice. Hashem to the Eibush. Ushlamim. Yes, the peace offering has a portion which is meant for the sacrificer, for the host, for the person bringing the carbon. Look at footnote 52. The last word of that footnote, quote, Shemasim Shalom, they place peace from the back to the altar. Ula Oived Avoida, and to the Kohen who's sacrificing the carbon, Ula Bailam, and to the host who's bringing the carbon. 3 Chavere sit together, the Eibishter, the Kohen, and the person bringing the carbon. Also, they're going to take them to eat the meat, enjoy the meat together. Says the Rebbe, Veheim Shnei Zoltachis. And those are the 2 halves of the covenant. The 2 halves of the covenant are not the half that went to the Mizbeach and half that went to the Jew. The 2 halves of the covenant are both the halves that went to the Yidden. And those 2 halves, the half that went to the blood that's sprinkled on Yidden, that's called sacrifice. And the blood that's sprinkled on Yidden, which is called peace, is divided in half to create the covenant between Yidden and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. 1 half is connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the blood of the sacrifice. The other half is related to the Jewish people. The sacrifice, which is about peace. And the pasuk is therefore pointing out by Yosam Ba'agonis. So to say it again, Moshe doesn't divide the blood in half; he divides the blood into quarters. And our issue is the halves of the dam oil and dam shamim, which were put in the 2 separate basins to sprinkle on the Jewish people. By Yosam Ba'agonis, he puts them in 2 different basins. Iyar and Moshe does not mix together. At Shnei Hadamim, the 2 bloods that are meant to be sprinkled on the Jewish people. V'zdarkom yachad ala'am, to sprinkle them together on the Jewish people. Elashasam esam b'shtei agon, put in 2 separate bowls. V'hizem mikol echad, that he sprinkled the blood from each of these 2 with ne'atzmai separately ala'am over the people. Why? You listening?
Yeah.
You're so sweet. Okay, you just know your teacher, yeah? Shadavke bazeh mudlash. Davke, emphatically through this, you sprinkle the blood separately. Is it emphasized geder abris, the concept and the criteria of a covenant? Azor mishnei chelki adam, sprinkling the 2 halves of the girls. I'm going to read the parenthesis, even though I didn't underline it. Okay? Keilu avri Yisrael ben shnei chelki adam. Is it the Jewish people passed between the 2 halves of the blood? So what are the 2 halves of the whole? The Yidden are walking between the 2 different animals. The 2 different animals. But these 2 different animals combine to be a covenant between Yidden and the Eibishter, and the Yidden are walking through between the two bloods. So just like Abraham walked between the two halves of animals, the Yidden walk between the two halves of blood, even though the blood is two different animals. Now, based on how I started today's class, you can give me a philosophical argument that it was a bad covenant. How did I explain it to you? That when an animal dies, as long as the flesh is still alive, the soul is still there, and the soul is still living and one, right? When you walk between the halves of the animal, so you're unified by the life of that animal, which is singular, right? But here's two different bloods. The blood of one animal, blood of another animal. One is an oila, one is a shlomen. So where is the life here? And of course, the first answer to that question is, I don't know, and I got to reconsider my whole philosophy, even though I didn't make it up. But the simple answer is simple, it's very partial. There's an animal. It's alive. There's an animal. It's alive. And then there's a covenant which is alive. Now, the covenant is not a physical thing, it's a philosophical thing. And the covenant is affected by these two animals, these two groupings of animals. And although the blood from one and the blood from another are two different animals, if it's not a single life, but the combination of these two animals to contribute to the covenant has its own life. And that life is one. And by dividing the two bloods in half, the half that we give to God and we have to give to ourselves, we're unified in the life of the bringing together of two things. According to Torah, there's no such thing as a physical thing without a soul. You know, like everything that exists could deteriorate into smaller units. An atom is made up of parts, it can come apart. Atomic particles are made of parts, they can come apart. What keeps them together? Well, the strong force and the weak force. That's what chemistry says, that's what physics says. Taylor says there's a soul there. That's why it says in Tanya, a stone has a soul. Now, so if an atomic particle has a soul that keeps it together, and then those atomic particles are glued together into an atom, which has a bigger soul, what happened to the smaller souls? It's a soul within a soul, right? You take that atom, you put it in the atom, you speak, you make a molecule. It's a more complex living thing. You treat those molecules to make whatever they call it, a polymer, a string of molecules, until you have that entity that we call the living entity, single cell organism. A lot of people on this planet who are very smart who actually believe that by mistake, dead chemicals can become a living cell. We don't believe that exactly, right? We don't believe it. God's got to get involved to make those kind of transitions. But there's life everywhere. So when you talk about a complex living thing, there's a series of layers to that living thing. Why? There's how that thing is alive at its most basic elemental component. There's how that thing is alive as those small components made into bigger ones. There's a third, and there's layers upon layers of life. You see what I'm saying? There's so much life. Torah believes that everything is living. There's God in everything. Life is God. So the Abraham gave us a mitzvah, make a covenant with him. There is the life of the animal, and the life of the animal, and the life of the covenant. It's a higher form of life. This animal is living. This animal is living. Abraham cut the physical animal in half, and he walked through between the two halves of the animal, and the life of that animal represented the covenant. Here, the life of the idea of the covenant is representing the covenant. Why? Because one half is from one animal, and the other half from the other animal. So where's the unity? Where are you walking through a single unit of life? Because the idea that the Eibushter is making a covenant by bringing us together with him, where half is him and half is us, half is Oila and half is Shlomen, that idea is a living thing. And the Yidden walk through between the parts. What are the parts? Half the blood which is sprinkled on them, which is representing sacrifice, and half the blood which is sprinkled on the Mizbeach, which is representing what the Jewish people bring to the table, or Jewish people enjoy at the table, if you will. Ulepirosh Danim, the last line, first column, 122. In this version of the Sicha, as opposed to the version of the Sicha of the first half before those two very, very faithful horizontal lines. Nimta turns out, Shepulas Haknisa Lebris, the act of Jewish people entering into a covenant with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hoysarak, happened only only the blood sprinkled on the people. The blood sprinkled on the Mizbeach is not a part of the covenant. The dividing in half is not the half of man and half of God. Mistake. It's the half of man and half of man. So this is half a man, this half a man, we're the two halves. Half for a man, which is about man giving away, and half for a man of a man keeping for himself. Those are the two halves of the half of the covenant which made the covenant up. Okay, past it, it says in the scriptural text, which is so brilliant about the Rebbe, he flushes out the Rashi, which is flushing out the Psukim. You just see it in the original scripture. Moshe took the blood, but Yitzchak our arm sprinkled it only on the people. But Yerim, he said, this is the blood of the covenant. What is the deal? Okay, what's the nuance here? What's the pressing on the nerve here? That the blood that I'm sprinkling on you, that's the covenant. The blood that I'm sprinkling on this Beach, if you read the Sicha entirely, is a technicality. It's not that important. It's the bloods in plural that I'm speaking on you, the oila half or the shlama half. That's the hine. Behold, the blood I'm sprinkling. Moshe said, the blood I'm sprinkling on you. That's the covenant. Ashakar for the shami macham that the Abish is making with you translates the Rebbe in Yiddish, in Hebrew, yeah. Only this half of the blood, the half that the Yidden got as an oila, the half that the Yidden got as a shlamim. That's the blood of the covenant. IOW, right? I owe William money, you know. In other words, next paragraph. The half of the blood which is put on the mizbeach, that's not an actual, it's not an inherent part of the covenant. Eludovat study, it's a secondary thing. It's a tangential thing. Because since the blood of the covenant needed to have shame. Now don't translate shame in English. Translate shame in Hebrew. The name, Dam oil, blood which is sacrificed. Dam shlomim, and blood which brings peace. You can't have blood which kills a sacrifice unless you make a sacrifice. You can't have blood which is called peace unless you make a sacrifice. So you give half of it to God to make it an oil, to make it a shlomim. So you got to give God half to give it those labels. But the part of the label which is significant is the one you're putting on the Yidden. These two bloods must each be part of sacrifices, which is placed on the Mizbeach. But by placing half the blood on the Mizbeach, these two animals, or these two series of animals, become oilers and shlomim. And then when that half of oiler, that half of shlomim is sprinkled on the Yidden, here's the covenant. Which explains the reason why. The Akosot Misaper, the Torah speaks only in detail. The Torah gives very little attention to the blood sprinkled on there. It does say the words, but in no way does it mention that they took mizrakois, which is another word for basins, and they put this down and this down. They don't bother with those details, only with the details of relation with the Jewish people. Why? So this is where the covenant lay. The primary intent of this parasha is it's not to talk about the sacrifices, it's not to talk about the rituals, it's to talk about the pact, the blood of covenant. The covenant of the Baruch Hu so that Almighty make with the Jewish people. And how was this covenant affected and manifest? As the Heilig Gereh by the Adas Hadamim, by sprinkling the blood, only the Heilig Hadam Shesam Bagones, in that portion of the blood which was put in basins to be sprinkled on the Jewish people. Question and comments. I'm stopping in the middle, but question and comments. Go ahead.
Wait, the moment I survived in Shem and the There's two brought in. How is it divided in half? Some it's divided in three.
Okay. First of all, I share your question. The best I have right now, it's not who eats the shlomim, it's the very concept that we're sharing. And that's what I hear. That you could sit at the table with the Eibushter and eat. The Chazal say tzaddikim demim l'bayim. The rabbis tell us that tzaddikim are like the Eibushter, but you're not allowed to make that comparison. But I heard a story a few weeks ago. I wish I could remember from whom, but my memory is finished. Somebody told me a sweet little story. It's the kind of story that I don't believe in. I can't believe I never heard, but it's so powerful. In Lubavitch, the Shtetl Lubavitch, there was a coachman, a wagon driver, an Uber driver. He spent his days taking horses. I'm saying he's a wonderful guy, but he was no Einstein. And for whatever reason, the previous Rebbe invited this Balagala to dine with him and the Rebbe Rashab. You had three guys sitting at the table. The Rebbe Rashab is one guy, the Frierdiker Rebbe is another guy, and the Uber driver is the third guy. He was a Yid, but he wasn't a Rebbe, you see. Anyway, they sit down to eat. They probably watch, I'm sure, when the Rebbe Bechal, when they can eat, there's holiness in their food, there's holiness in their prayers. Everything is very precise, very correct. But they barely eat. They taste the food, the Balagos is starving. He wants to eat the whole situation. But he's so uncomfortable because he's sitting with two men who are also having a meal, and they took their time. They took forever, but they ate very little, They talked, they ate a piece of bread, they talked some more, they don't think of it. And the wagon driver he's famished, but he can't eat in front of two people who are eating like, the expression is eating like a bird. There's nothing further from the truth, because birds have the highest metabolic rate of all animals. Birds eat more per pound than any other animal, but that's what they say, eating like a bird. It's an expression. So finally, the previous Rebbe turns to the poor guy and says, "You want to go eat in the kitchen?" He says, "Yeah." He went into the kitchen, he had the whole meal, right? You want to go eat. The Frierdiker Rebbe sends to this company. So the three guys sit at the table, but there's a concept here. Sitting at the table with the Eibushter. So you're right, there's three partners, but it's the concept of Shalom. It's the concept that you and I, Aniva Ato Ben Yishay Metailim B'Yachad B'Gan Eden. I don't know why I brought that much, but you get it. Questions or comments? Now, if you have no questions and you have no comments, I keep reading. Page 120, last underlined paragraph, the second half of the underline. Al Pihana. Now that we reconfigured the Sicha, because the first half of the Sicha, the division was between the half of the blood that went on the Mizbeach and the half of the blood that was sprinkled on the Jews. Now we're saying, no, it's the half of blood that was sprinkled on the Jews, which is itself divided in half. Half is oil, half is shlamim. So therefore, once you accept my version of what Rashi is saying on the Psukim, you discover the following. I'll be on this basis. Where does the covenant begin? This fact that when Moshe takes half the blood and puts them in two basins, right? In plain, simple American English, he divides the divided in half. He quarters the half. You understand? The blood's been divided in half. He divided it into two halves again. This action of Moshe Rabbeinu, to put the blood in two separate basins. One for the half of the blood, which is the sacrifice of sacrifice. The other half is to the blood of the sacrifice of peace. It's exactly the same thing as the Rambam Vidu cutting the animal in half. And what living thing is being cut in half to create the covenant? Not an animal, but the concept of the covenant. Because there's two different animals. That's my own piece of philosophy thrown in just in fun. Okay? Now, girls, I want you to understand what the Rebbe has done is explain a Rashi precisely. And we didn't sit on the Rashi. I'm not learning the Sicha the Rashi. I'm learning the Sicha, but not Torah. So we didn't wallow in the nuances of Rashi, but there's a pasuk and there's a Rashi. Rashi studies the pasuk very precisely. The Rebbe studies Rashi very precisely, and he's flushing out what the Rashi is flushing about okay, and showing us something different than most of the Mepharshim say. Fine. So we thought that the covenant was this division, and now the covenant is this division. But now comes the fundamental American question. Who cares?
Mm.
Who cares? Now, the who cares, we're going to find out next week. But I just want to read two more paragraphs on page 121. Okay? The habit of people making covenant is Bishnei Parashim, have two parts. Aleph, L'chal Behemah, to divide an animal in half, and Beis, Lav and Beis, to go through between the parts. You have to divide the blood in half. You have to divide the animal half and then walk through it, right? So what will be the nimshah? You divide the blood in half and then you walk through between halves of the blood. Wait a second. Half goes on the mizbeach and half stays with us. So how are we walking through between the parts? That's the question. The primary act of the covenant does not cut the animal in half, but walking through between the parts. Because these two halves of an animal are part of one living thing. And on some mystical level, it's still living, and you're walking into a living animal, right? Here's the next question. We have a question. We know what Abraham did. He took an animal, cut it in half. The animal is now biologically, it's scientifically dead, but as long as that meat's still sitting there, hasn't been eaten up or decomposed or rotted, the soul is still present. The soul is one. You're walking into a singular soul. What about here? How is this event happening? To walk through between two halves of the whole living thing, if half is going on the mizbeach and half is not keeping, al derech ha'avara ben shnei habitzadim, I walk between half of the paradum of the mizbeach. Why? Because the half that goes on the mizbeach and the half that the yidden are doing are not connected. The mizbeach and the mizbeach, yidden are the yidden, we're two different places. So how is sprinkling half the blood of the mizbeach and sprinkling half the blood of the yidden constituting two halves of one whole? So that ever no. The two halves of the blood that were both sprinkled on the yidden. That's the division. Read it. Al pi hanal b'shittas Rashi, but with the renewed understanding of Rashi, that the two halves of the covenant are not the half that goes on the mizbeach and the half that's sprinkled on the yidden, but the two halves are the oila half and the shlomim half of the blood that are both sprinkled on the Jewish people. It's understood. Moshe sprinkled both halves of the blood of this covenant. Chati oila v'chati shlomim, half of the oila and half of the shlomim. Al bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people. Shaydei zedesach v'shnei tzugi adam. The two blood became one, and the Jewish people walked through them. This offers sort of a pshat necessity for this. What is the pshat necessity for saying that the two halves of blood are not the half that went on the bed and half that's sprayed on the Jews, but the two halves that are both sprayed on the Jews? It makes the idea of walking through between the parts more comprehensive. But why? We're still asking why. Okay, I understand. You're walking through between the two halves of the blood that you have, so it's a real covenant there. But why? Why was it so important that the two halves of the blood that we're walking between is the two halves that's being sprinkled on us? I'm going to say this for next week. I want to. I could finish this here. I don't want to. Why? Because I love drama. I get a chance to tell the story. Yeah. Because I want it to be flushed out. It's only a few lines. If you look at the end of it, we're almost done. In other words, next week's class is going to be the end of the Sicha plus the beginning of the Nasa the Mishnah. I want to do Nasa the Mishnah. I can't find the Sicha on it. It's so interesting. Nasa the Mishnah. Huh? So I have a whole bunch of, I prepared a whole bunch of sources that I have to choose between, having to make my decision. I spent time in these classes, I really do, I try to, why? Because I love it, that's why, because it's a labor of love. The Rebbe is gonna propose that the covenant between the parts is not as complete a covenant as this is a deeper covenant. On the one hand, we're comparing this covenant to the covenant between the parts. On the other hand, it's a more profound covenant, it's later, more precise, it's more full. And we shall do that. A fortnight means 2 weeks, right? So what do you say is very thin? It's a half of a fortnight.
A week.
A week? Well, that's boring, no one knows that word. Okay, I'll see you in a week. Yeah. Why was that off? Did I turn it on? Oh man, you can speak with me.
Oh, Shem, she still has this where I want to
Oh.
back up.
One second. Did the class come on? Question mark. If it didn't, we can go to Facebook and get it. It's also available on. I sometimes forget to put it on.